In a world where chaos reigns, and justice is a forgotten word, one truth remains behind every end. There's a crime yet unsolved. Welcome to Behind the Crime. Your journey into the dark begins now.
Late-night talk shows are dead. Almost all the hosts have been exposed as either fake, sociopathic, or just straight up unbearable to watch.
No, seriously, go on.
Okay.
No, go on. You can see my belly, and we can all see you dying right now. Let's go for it. Here we go.
But only two men stand out amongst the rest in the TV industry: Conan O'Brien and Craig Ferguson. Even after decades of being on air, both of these men continue to hold up their reputation as being some of the only authentic, relatable and funny guys in the entire industry, who went through their career without almost a dent in their reputation. So how do they do it? Why are these men so loved by the world? What made them so special? Well, let's dive in to see how their early experiences would shape the entire trajectory of their careers. Conan O'Brien grew up making people laugh. From a young age, he knew he could improve someone's mood or break the tension in a group with humor, so he used it to his advantage.
I knew that I could do that fairly young as a kid, that I could do that and I could make my friends laugh, and if someone was sad, I could lighten the mood, and if there was tension, I could break the mood and make everybody happy.
Doing it so much that making people laugh almost became his second nature. So when he attended Harvard University, he would receive multiple opportunities to improve his comedy through the written word and performance. Not only did he start writing for the Harvard Lampoon, a really prestigious humor magazine, home to some of the most famous comedians, but he also enjoyed the university's theatre program, where he would participate in a number of projects and develop his physical comedy. He would often lean into how tall and lanky he was, whilst also playing on his Irish heritage to draw laughter from those who came to watch the performance. A few years after graduating, his writing skills eventually earned him a job on the team behind The Simpsons, just when The Simpsons was completely taking off, straight after the Tracy Ullman show. This was the opportunity of a lifetime. Matt Groening was soaring in popularity. Nobody had ever seen anything like The Simpsons before, so he took the chance with everything. Now, while he only did write 3 episodes for the show, he proved to be one of the most powerful writers on the team. Each episode features O'Brien's signature humor and his understanding of the ridiculousness of the characters, but also just the ridiculousness of American society at the time. However, there was more than just slapstick humor in his writing, particularly in season's 4 New Kid on the Block episodes. While it kept up the nature of Homer's wild adventures, it also portrayed Bart in a much more vulnerable way, as he found himself falling for his new neighbor and getting his heart broken after realizing she was already dating one of Springfield's bullies. Each exchange between Bart and his crush is grounded by the genuineness between the two characters, and the fact that they reflect a very similar childhood experience to some of the viewers. Their sweet moments are balanced by Homer suing a restaurant owner for falsely advertising an all-you-can-eat buffet. The episode's really charming, as it's hilarious and adds a new level of depth to some of the show's characters, and this was right around The Simpsons' golden age, when everything they touched turned to gold, and Conan was riding the wave of this. However, it would soon become clear that Conan O'Brien's impact went way beyond just the show itself. He wasn't just a funny guy, but a genuinely nice guy with whom people loved to work, which was particularly evident whenever his name is mentioned in conversations amongst the Simpson team. Take, for example, the mini-writers reunion in 2013. Or the commentary tracks on his episodes. The team was always sharing stories about how much O'Brien used to make his co-workers laugh, and the moments are remembered with fondness. They enjoyed the comedian and his wackiness so much that they'd often call him to redo his bits.
There was one thing that I did for you guys, which is I would...
There was more than one.
There was more, but there was one where I would fill my mouth with Coca-Cola and then start twitching and vibrating, and the Coke would foam up in my mouth and spill out like foam, and I would do this thing, and you guys would call for it occasionally. You'd be like, do that again, chop chop, and I would do it.
There were a bunch.
And even used a phrase he made up and frequently repeated, Jub Jub, as the name of Patty's pet iguana.
I tell one story about something.
Sure.
Jub Jub's on this.
Yes.
And I remember one time it was just, we were talking about how the shows had so much material in them that you said, everything goes into this vortex. Like, Jub Jub, there. Now that it exists, it will go in the show.
I just made up a word, Jub Jub, and I said, this show feeds on anything that's in the atmosphere, and I said Jub Jub, and not long after that...
Very soon after...
I think you said it more than once.
Yeah, I said a lot. Really?
While he didn't stay with the team for too long, David Merkin, the former showrunner of The Simpsons, once declared that O'Brien was his rock, specifically when he was restaffing the show for season 5. He really seemed to admire the comedian, and sang his praises as a terrific writer and supportive person whenever he got the opportunity. So much so that in the episode Bart Gets Famous, they actually wrote Conan in as the host for the late night show, and it was never even confirmed if he'd ever ever get the job or not, but that wasn't the only time they showed their love for him. Although one thing that should have been on Conan's mind was his data security and privacy. With the rise of data brokers, anyone could have their personal information leaked online, which is why I want to tell you about our video sponsor, Aura. You see, data brokers sell your information to anyone interested, scammers, spammers, you name it. Your full name, email, home address, health records, and even details about your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've turned to Aura. Aura meticulously scans for data brokers peddling my information, and steps in to automatically submit opt-out requests on my behalf. Imagine logging into Aura and finding out just how many brokers are exploiting your personal information. But here's the kicker, cleaning up my digital footprints with Aura does more than just cut down on the annoying spam. It's a crucial step in safeguarding my accounts, from social media to banking, against hackers who could exploit this freely available information. I don't know if you saw this, but AT&T revealed that over 72 million customer records, both existing and former customers, were released on the dark web. They recommended those affected use strong passwords, monitor account activity, and consider credit freezes or fraud alerts from credit bureaus. Well, Aura does all of this for me, and best of all, I don't have to download several different apps just because the company couldn't keep my data secure. If my info was compromised in the AT&T data breach, I wouldn't worry, because Aura is always on, always doing the hard work of keeping me safe. So make sure to check out aura.com/moon, link in the description to start your 2-week free trial today. When the first episode of The Late Show with Conan O'Brien premiered, the Simpsons team was having a party to celebrate the release of their 100th episode. They wanted to show their support for what had once been an integral member of their team, and so Merkin arranged for the team to watch the episode live. When Conan was telling a joke or doing a bit, he intends to make people laugh, even if their world seems to be falling apart around them. Craig Ferguson, on the other hand, often tries to delve into deeper topics and makes people think, which is why he and Conan have become so loved by audiences, all whilst all mainstream celebrities, and in particular late night hosts, seem so despised. Craig Ferguson also grew up in a working class family, and because of financial difficulty dropped out of school at 16 so that he could join the workforce and support his family. After a few years of working at a local factory, Ferguson entered the entertainment industry as a drummer, joining several different bands along the way. Around the same time, he began to develop a problem with alcohol, relying on it to escape his darker thoughts. One of the bands he drummed in was Dream Boys, a punk band formerly known as the Bastards from Hell, which once boasted the vocals of none other than Peter Capaldi, one of the more famous Doctor Who actors, and the man Ferguson credits with encouraging him to pursue comedy. Motivated by his bandmates' belief in him, Ferguson tried stand-up for the first time, and soon decided that he needed a character to hide behind, so he created Bing Hitler. The persona was, in Craig Ferguson's words, a parody of all the uber-patriotic native folk singers, who seemed to infect every public performance in Scotland. This character became an instant hit with all those who watched it, and while Craig did seem to have plenty of fun on stage, the unfortunate truth was that Ferguson was in a dangerous downward spiral, and was quickly heading for oblivion behind the scenes. I mean, things got so bad in his late 20s that he almost attempted to pass his life twice, and unfortunately these issues didn't magically resolve themselves, as Craig Ferguson was finding himself at rock bottom, even while his comedy was loved. After his final attempt, one of the bartenders spotted him heading out, and convinced him to have one last drink with him. Ferguson agreed and completely forgot about his plans, and he eventually came out of his binge and had a moment of clarity.
I was actually on my way to do it. What happened was I was going to jump off Tower Bridge in London, which is the big dramatic bridge that opens up. I thought I'll swan dive off that bridge and kill myself. I don't know how to dive. I just thought, well, I'll cross that bridge when I come to it, sort of thing. And then I, on the way to kill myself, I met a guy and he offered me a drink and I drank it and I forgot to kill myself that day. We ended up drinking, but it really was, in kind of a way, it helped me understand later on, it helped me understand that I was using it as some kind of medicine, you know?
His drinking habits, that are so common in Scotland, were actually destroying him inside. And while it took a bunch of hard work and dedication, it made Craig Ferguson relatable, like a real person who has pain and suffering in their life, and has had to do everything he can to push himself forward. After this, Ferguson went sober, and since that moment, his life only seemed to go up. He started appearing on TV shows and specials, and eventually moved to the US, where he got his breakthrough role as Mr. Wick on The Drew Carey Show, a character he played from 1996 to 2003. Around this time, he also showed off his talent as a writer in the films like Big Tease, Saving Grace, and I'll Be There, eventually appearing on Late Night with Conan. And that was when the two would join forces, becoming some of the most beloved people on TV, all because they really shared the same sense of humor. They'd been through similar struggles, and they both seemed the most relatable and normal out of the whole celebrity celebrity roster at the time. Their energy was so good that they couldn't stop laughing throughout the entire show. So much so that Ferguson had to do all the talking on Conan's show.
Why would they send you to that?
Because I'm so Spanish-looking, obviously, you idiot. Look at me. I'm just the most Spanish person you know, and it's in Los Angeles, where you can't get Spanish people, obviously. So.
And because of this, in 2004, fans and those working in the business saw how good he'd be on his own show after seeing the chemistry between the two on Conan's show. So that was when CBS announced that he would actually take over the Late Late Show, a huge moment for his career. While neither Conan nor Ferguson had been in the talk show business for years, they constantly challenged how things were done, and the world was better for it. They knew that because of the late hours of their respective shows, their networks didn't really care that much about what happened on air, meaning they could do almost anything they wanted without some Hollywood executive breathing down their neck. When Conan took over the late night show, he was met with a bunch of hatred from people who didn't think he was qualified for the job. He was too nerdy, too awkward and anxious. While transitioning from the incredibly supportive environment facilitated by the Simpsons team to a hostile space where people still hadn't accepted the retirement of a popular talk show, must have been very jarring. But the comedian never let this experience kill his sense of humor. Rather than listen to the critics who found him off, Conan adapted the show to suit his absurdity better, loosening the formal format people were used to by incorporating crazy sketches with bizarre characters. Soon his audience found him, and Conan continued to do the unexpected. His monologue segments grew particularly popular, as they were spontaneous, unpredictable, and felt unscripted, especially when he went off on a tangent that were more to make people laugh than anything else. He didn't view himself as an overly important or revolutionary individual. I mentioned in a previous video that he never really was that political compared to others, who forced their preachy virtue signaling stances into almost every show they did. In fact, he actually found it absurd that a talk show host could be more valued than others, often commenting on the ridiculousness of his situation and declaring that he ultimately didn't matter. He was making a mockery of himself, turning awkward moments into comedy gold and using his position to bolster his guests. His willingness to play with the format and let his guests try their hands at comedy made their interactions more genuine and entertaining. He's less interested in making sure he gets the big laughs and more interested in just having fun with people and seeing what they can do.
I'm someone who likes to, okay, let's see what we can do here, and I don't care who gets the big laughs as long as we have some fun.
While Conan did a bunch to challenge the mold of talk shows, Ferguson truly took advantage of the creative freedom that came with the lack of supervision from his network. The talk show felt restless, almost like the Scotsman thought every episode would be his last, so he gave his all to each one, and people absolutely loved it. During an interview with Ellen, one of the worst hosts, he admitted he'd initially signed a 6-year contract with the network because he didn't think he'd last longer than 2 days.
I thought I'd be out after 2 shows. I figured I would do the 2 tryout shows and then I'd be done. And so they said, because they were trying out different people, they said, just in case you get the job, you have to sign a 6-year contract. And I think, well, what's the problem? I'll sign a 6-year contract. I'm going to be here 2 days. It's not a problem.
Right.
It's 5.5 years later. I'm still here, yeah.
The Diamondback described the show as a brilliant deconstruction of the late night format, led by Ferguson's natural charm, sharp wit, and contempt of the status quo. This refusal to mold the status quo was a direct result of Ferguson's past. He didn't really care about ratings or any other Hollywood BS like everyone else in his position. He wasn't just trying to get the viral video, and instead preferred a more wacky, authentic setup. Where other talk show hosts had monologues with a series of disconnected jokes, fake laughs, and virtue signaling, Ferguson focused on one thing, and much like Conan, never felt scripted. If he wasn't doing a cold open with a group of puppets, he'd perform a stream of consciousness bit where he just spoke about anything from life and death to everything in between. He had no band to play his guest on and off stage, possibly a result of a smaller budget that just became a permanent fixture of the show because it added a level of charm. It didn't just seem so over the top and fake and contrived. This was a talk show for people who hated talk shows. That's why he loved experimenting with the format, often making his show unpredictable and leading to moments that didn't quite land. Still, his unflappable nature made it seem like anything that happened on stage had gone exactly according to plan. It was remarkable that the network actually let him stay on the air for as long as he did, but they seemed to understand that he'd won people over with his outlandish humor, authentic nature, and dirty mouth. While his wackiness made him stand out, Ferguson wasn't afraid to get serious, and one of the most notable examples of this happened in 2007. That year, Britney Spears was going through an infamous mental breakdown, and a very public one at that. Everyone in Hollywood and other talk show hosts would do everything they can to take her down to make themselves seem better.
25 years old, and she's already accomplished everything she's going to accomplish in her life. It's mind-blowing, and she's so grown up. She's a mother, you know, it's crazy. It's weird to think that just a few years ago on this very show, she was this, like, sweet, innocent little girl in slutty clothes riding around with a python.
However, Ferguson felt bad for her. Having struggled with a debilitating addiction himself, he didn't really want to make a joke out of someone's very real struggle and famously vowed against making fun of her whilst relating her story to his own.
So I looked at her weekend and I looked at my own weekend and I thought, you know, I'd rather have my weekend. But what she's going through reminds me of what I was doing. It's an anniversary, you start to think about it. It reminds me of where I was 15 years ago when I was living like that.
It was a heartfelt moment and solidified the Scotsman as many people's favourite talk show host, while also making them question the integrity of those who had used Spears' struggle for ratings. Another notable incident was in 2012, when he re-recorded an introduction of an episode after the Aurora shooting, speaking from his actual heart, not just pre-planned lines on a teleprompter, refusing to ignore the situation.
We are all diminished by this. Every time something like this happens, we are all diminished by it.
But his interviews would be where he stood out. While he told Jenny McCarthy that he didn't consider himself an interviewer, he proved to be one of the greatest interviewers ever. This was mainly because he seemed to just have fun with his guests. One of the show's reoccurring jokes was that when Ferguson and his guests would sit down to talk, he would then just rip up all his cue cards and toss the pieces of paper behind him, before getting as close as possible to the guest and just striking up a real conversation with them, not just pre-planned lines by his producer, which allowed their discussions to go from feeling like over-rehearsed sales pitches for upcoming projects to genuine actual discussions about their interests, with many forgetting that they were actually there to promote a film in the first place, almost spawning the podcast movement we've seen over the last decade. While not all of his guests could keep up with him, often leading to awkward silences, many just loved the way he performed on his show, and kept coming back for more whenever they had an excuse to. This was particularly true for several female celebrities. Usually in the past, when female celebrities would go on these shows, they'd either just seem really awkward, be hit with inappropriate comments, or just have a really bad vibe about them.
You are so incredibly young and beautiful to have gotten this part. I mean, at age, what, 19?
Yeah.
However, none of them seemed uncomfortable around Ferguson. In fact, he's actually famous online for flirting with them. And yes, in many of his interviews, he's actually flirting with his interviewees, but usually through compliments.
Oh, you're really very attractive, you know that?
More often than not, the women flirt right back at him, because it's not forced and it does seem real. Some have even surprised Ferguson with how they've responded to his joking advances. So why do they respond so well to him but not other talk show hosts? Well, because as much as Ferguson may play a creep for the camera, it's evident that he never meant real harm. It also helped that he was joking with them the same way he was joking with the men who appeared on the show, and sometimes even seemed to flirt with them even more. He would never push a joke past the point of discomfort, and always allowed his guests to determine how far they wanted a flirty bit to go. However, his greatest interview might be with the Archbishop Desmond Tutu. The two men discussed the long, complicated history of South Africa and the Archbishop's role in bringing an end to apartheid.
Have you found out how powerful telling one story can be?
It was so good that The Late Late Show received a Peabody Award for the interview, and Ferguson often cited Desmond Tutu as the man who changed his life and his show.
There was one guest that changed my life and changed the show, and it was Desmond Tutu.
While Conan and Ferguson never managed to break out of the talk show mold, they did seem to be a huge inspiration for all the podcasts we see today online, and it's why both of them stood out compared to all the fake, corporatized talk show hosts out there. And when they appeared together, it was an unstoppable force. When Ferguson appeared alongside Conan, he immediately derailed the entire conversation with a wild anecdote, often leaving them at both a loss for words.
One came and peed right outside my dressing room. It's kind of like a territory thing. So I went to the
That was not the emu.
You did
Yeah.
Well, I peed in your dressing room anyway.
Unsure how to carry on the conversation and struggling to return it to the object of the interview. While it was incredible to see how they balanced out each other and brought out the best sides of their respective humor, their interviews together often proved how timeless they actually were.